Staying in touch with your community through local news and information is the gift that keeps giving all year long. Subscribe to Inforum now and get 50% off an annual subscription for you or anyone on your list. Just call 833-248-7801. That's 833-248-7801.
After a meltdown for the ages, I took my husband's advice to decrease Christmas stress and carried it out with the help from an old Sicilian friend. Hi, this is Tracy Briggs, and welcome to Back Then. Confession time. If you saw me at Trinity Lutheran Church in Moorhead at Christmas Eve a few years back and witnessed me crying in the pew, it was not from the emotion of the beautiful service. It was a beautiful service, but that's not why I was crying. I was at my wit's end, about ready to blow like a pork roast in a pressure cooker. To summarize, I had been juggling, like many of us do, writing Christmas cards, shopping for gifts, wrapping gifts, finding stocking stuffers, volunteering, planning meals, and holding down a full-time job while raising 2 tween daughters who were not quite Christmas angels that week. I don't know what caused me to finally blow my top. I just know I could not stop the tears from flowing that night. It was a release from a month of Christmas stress. Now, after the holiday was over, my husband, who is a very smart man, who knew not to try and speak rationally to me about my meltdown until January, showed concern and tried to figure out how we as a family could de-stress Christmas. His idea was to simplify Christmas Eve dinner. That's a start, right? Contrary to popular belief, I don't really like cooking. I really love baking, but cooking to me is usually just a chore. However, one Christmas, my sister, who is an excellent cook, she and I decided to do something extra special for Christmas Eve dinner. We'd honor our Briggs heritage by making a British feast. So we toiled away making beef Wellington, Yorkshire pudding, plum pudding, and sticky toffee pudding. Apparently the Brits are really into their puddings. Now, I do say toil because it was a ton of work, and the results were just not worth it. We spent hours making the dishes and minutes eating what could be described as food. The one exception, interestingly enough, was the easiest dish to make, the sticky toffee pudding, which was super yummy. Anyway, realizing how complicated our Christmas Eve food had become, my husband said, "Why don't we just do something easy like spaghetti?" Now, to him, that meant nothing more than boxed pasta and a jar of Prego, but I wanted to do something just a little more special for Christmas Eve. Now, I resisted the urge to make homemade pasta, as that would completely defeat the purpose. So I stuck with the boxed pasta, but found a recipe for authentic spaghetti sauce and meatballs from a favorite old Sicilian friend. Tom Pantera isn't exactly Sicilian. He grew up in Columbia Heights, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis, but he is of Sicilian heritage. I worked with him a few years ago while I was at WDAY TV, and he was a reporter at the Forum. Now, he moved away from Fargo, but we've remained in touch on Facebook, where he once mentioned his grandmother's spaghetti sauce and just how delicious it was. He has vivid memories of his grandma, Catherine Novella Stornant, who was right off the boat from Sicily, he says. He said, "My grandmother was a very sweet woman with an ample build, a lovely smile, and a liking to be teased. She and my dad got along famously. I still vividly remember her kitchen. For some reason, I particularly recall that she always had oyster crackers in her pantry, and to this day, whenever I see oyster crackers, I think of her." Pantera said his mother made the sauce, too, and they had it once or twice a year, and he always knew when he smelled it cooking and watched his mom bustle about the kitchen that he would eat until he burst that day. He learned to make the sauce himself, too. He said, "Personally, and this probably is making tomato sauce carry a bit too much freight, for me, it's a lovely connection to long-gone people and my heritage. I'm at least the 3rd generation to make it, and I assume it goes back farther than that, at least in some form. I remember the first time I made it. I nailed it. The smell was perfect. I could close my eyes and suddenly be back in Mom's or Grandma's kitchen. Pantera says the sauce is part of him and his family, something that he can share. He even gives jars of the sauce as gifts each Christmas. Now, the first year I made it, it was definitely a gift to me. It was simple and delicious and nearly stress-free. There were no tears that night at the Christmas Eve service, just smiles, peace, and warmth at the beautiful Christmas message, and knowing that I had a satisfying yet simple meal waiting for me at home. And so as not to completely turn my back on my own ancestors, we did have some sticky toffee pudding for dessert. Here is the recipe. And again, because this is a podcast, it's a little difficult to talk about the recipe. So if you want to see it written down, just go to inform.com. That's INFORUM.com. And just Google back then Tracy Briggs and include sauce or something like that. But I will read the recipe here if you want to be one of those people that can write things down really quickly. So here goes. Here is grandma sauce. It does make about 3 quarts of sauce. So here are the ingredients. 1 large 46-ounce can of tomato juice, 2 large 28-ounce cans of whole tomatoes, 1 large 12-ounce can of regular tomato paste, about 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1/2 cup of sugar, grated Romano or Parmesan cheese, about 1/2 cup or a little bit more, 2 cloves of garlic, minced, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 3 or 4 fresh basil leaves or 1.5 teaspoons of dried basil, and about 1/2 to 3/4 cup Mogan David wine, and of course a box of spaghetti, linguine, fettuccine, or whatever your favorite pasta is. Here are the instructions for the sauce. Empty whole tomatoes into a blender and liquefy. Then place the liquefied tomatoes with the tomato juice and tomato paste into a large pot and simmer for about 10 minutes. Add the remaining ingredients, except the pasta, of course, and simmer for about 2 hours. Taste the sauce after a few minutes to see if it might need more salt, sugar, or garlic. Pantera says he will usually add more of each of those things, the salt, sugar, and garlic. After about a half an hour, add the meatballs into the sauce and continue cooking. Now here is the recipe for the meatballs. Start with 1.5 cups of breadcrumbs, 1/2 cup milk, 2 pounds ground beef, 1/3 pound pork, ground, 2 eggs, a pinch or 2 of salt, a pinch or 2 of pepper, 2 cloves of minced garlic, 1/3 cup or more of grated cheese, whatever kind you like, 2 teaspoons of parsley, dried or fresh, and some cooking oil. Here are the directions to make the meatballs. Mix milk into the breadcrumbs to soften. Combine with the rest of the ingredients. Make a small patty and cook it until it's done in the microwave, and then taste it to make sure you're happy with the seasoning. I love this trick because then you don't waste all your meatballs if they're too, boring. So taste that little sample out of the microwave and just add whatever you feel like is missing. To me, I think I amped up the garlic and the salt a little bit. So add whatever you feel is missing. Once you're happy with the taste, put a little oil in your hands and roll the meat mixture into small balls. Then put oil into a frying pan and warm it up over medium-high heat. Then place the meatballs into the pan, turning until all the sides are browned. When all the meatballs are browned, put them in a colander and rinse them in hot water. Place the meatballs in the sauce that's probably already been simmering, and then cook it until it's done, about 1.5 hours. Then cook your pasta. Drain your pasta, then serve the sauce and meatballs over your favorite cooked pasta. I usually pair it with a Caesar salad and garlic bread. Now, a couple of notes about the recipe. It makes a lot of sauce. As I said, it's about 3 quarts of sauce, so you're either going to need to invite a huge crowd over for dinner or just be prepared to have storage containers available to freeze the excess. That's kind of nice because it does heat up really well and stays in the freezer just great. Now, when I've made the sauce and meatballs for Christmas Eve, I make it in the morning before the day gets too crazy, so it's fine to just simmer in the stove all day or just keep it warm in a crock pot. As Pantera said, it also just makes the house smell so good. Even the next day, I can smell it in the walls of my house. It's great. When you're ready to eat, all you need to do is make the pasta then, and the garlic bread and the salad, and there's no stress. Another note, I have occasionally forgotten to purchase the pork for the meatballs, and I have to admit I did miss the flavor. All ground beef or even all ground turkey is probably fine, but to me, that beef-pork mixture is definitely the most flavorful. Pantera also told a funny story about the wine. He said his grandfather was a home winemaker, but his grandmother always insisted they use Mogan David wine in the sauce. Now, I've tried to be authentic and use Mogan David, but sometimes I admit I'm just lazy and I use whatever red wine we have on hand, since the sauce just requires, less than a cup. I would say that, however, a sweeter red is definitely better than a dry red. I think both Pantera and I agree that the sauce is tastiest if you do add more than the 2 cloves of garlic as written in the recipe. But again, start with 2 and see what you like. As Pantera said, and I definitely agree, you'll probably want to add more garlic because, well, it's garlic. And a final note. Big thanks to Tom Pantera for sharing a piece of his family with me and all of you. If you ever make it back to the Forum, Tom, let's be sure to have a big bowl of spaghetti with grandma sauce and meatballs after we cover the Fargo City Commission. Heck, it makes so much. I bet we can invite all of them to join us. And I guess one more final note. That was my final note. But as far as the sticky toffee pudding I said I made for dessert, that if I were you, I'd just Google a recipe because I've tried them all. Nothing fancy. The Food Network has a good one. Another really easy dessert to have with this, again, super low stress and I think really good, it's just a brownie sundae. So make your brownies ahead of time, add some ice cream, chocolate syrup, you're good to go. And you know what? No more tears at Christmas Eve, unless they are tears of happiness. Again, thank you so much for joining me on Back Then. You guys have a Merry, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and Happy Holidays to everybody. And hope to check back with you next time.
Get reliable and accurate local news with Inform.com. Inform.com is your trusted local news source with journalists dedicated to keeping you informed about what's happening in your community. Visit Inform.com now.